currently on the phone with Mark. He's another one of the musicians that reached out about the interview series, so I'm going to go ahead and give him the opportunity to introduce himself.
Hey, what's up? My name is Mark Brown. I'm a Hammond B3 player and keyboard player. Originally from upstate New York, moved to Philly, worked on the Philadelphia music scene for a long time, for 15, 20 years, touring and doing some session work. And I just recently moved to Los Angeles during the pandemic, actually. And prior to the pandemic, I had been doing some session work out here. And when the pandemic hit, I lost a lot of work, as we all did. And I made a decision to kind of change things up, mix things up a bit. And I hit the road and headed out to LA. And right now I'm working out here as a session player. And the band that I had on the East Coast, I've started up again on the West Coast, and we're starting to tour a little bit. And I'm also a for hire guy. I do a lot of Hammond B3, a lot of organ stuff, funk, blues, jazz, country, rock, whatever. I'm in a psychedelic punk rock band too. So whatever, I'm down. I do it, pretty much do it all.
Awesome. So a little off topic. How was the process of trying to move during the pandemic, especially like cross country like that?
It was a little crazy, especially since I basically had my entire life. I have a little 5x8 enclosed trailer that my band would use to tour with.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically just loaded it up with everything that I own, and which mostly consisted of my music gear, and just hit the road. Initially what happened, was pandemic happened and lost all my work. And then I got divorced during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was living with my brother in Alabama, who he's also a musician. He was a New Orleans musician. And when the pandemic hit, his wife wanted to leave the city. So they moved 5 hours east to New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm sorry, to Alabama. And so I was living with him for a little bit and just kind of finding whatever work I could find. And finally I made the decision, well, I think I've always wanted to live on the West Coast. And so I'm going to do it. Packed up my trailer and moved out West. And it was very strange at first, just like doing all this during a pandemic. And like when I got to LA, the city was still pretty much shut down.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing happening. There was a few like things they tried to open up, but then they were closing back down because they had a spike in numbers. And so it was, when I got here, like nothing was happening. So it was very strange.
Sure. Yeah. That's a very bizarre time to try to make something like that happen, but good on you for actually, pulling it off and making it happen.
Yeah. Well, I felt like it was something that I needed to do, and I joked like I'm the only idiot moving to LA. Everyone's leaving LA, but it worked out. I got here and as I, was here a few months, things began to open up and I've
Mm-hmm.
started playing with people and I've been to some jam, I go to jam sessions regularly and I've met a lot of players and
Mm-hmm.
it's going, it's great. I'm glad it was tough at first, but I'm glad I made the move.
Sure. And, there's definitely that, kind of odd polarity to life where like most of the good things that have happened to me in my life have been because I just took the random chance. I could either be pass or fail. It could be miserable or it could lead to the best thing ever. And it's just always worked out for me whenever I took chances. It was only when I like meticulously planned that like things fell apart, and it just has been that way.
Yeah. I kind of like being messy sometimes. It can be stressful, but like sometimes you just take chances, like if I work very hard and I practice and I write a lot and I'm always trying to network but I didn't know, I didn't really I have a couple of friends out here. But I really was kind of starting over again, so it was a chance, but it was a chance that I'm a risk taker,
Sure. All
so
right. So
it was worth it.
on that note, we'll kind of backtrack a little.
Okay.
Tell me about how you first identified with music. Were you a kid and just heard it and you wanted to do it, or what was the process of you beginning to relate to music?
Well, I grew up. Neither of my parents were really musicians. They played instruments in school and stuff, but they loved music. I grew up around music was everywhere. My parents listened to a lot of music. My great grandfather was a jazz pianist in Harlem in the 1920s. and I learned a lot about him, and I have like all of his music, and he composed, and so I kind of like I was just surrounded by stories about him, and like like my parents were always listening to classic rock and the blues growing up, so I really kind of gravitated towards the Allman Brothers and Eric Clapton and that scene and BB King and
Hmm.
stuff. So it was just always on. Music was always playing in my house, and my dad would sing with me, and I remember. The funny story. I remember I used to. Do you remember Chuck E. Cheese? You
Yes.
remember the?
Yep.
Okay, so they used to have like the animatronic band, you know.
Hmm.
And I used to go to Chuck E. Cheese when I was a kid, and they had this band called the Beagles, and it was like the Beatles, but they were dogs.
Hmm.
And but they would just move and sing to actual Beatles songs from like Abbey Road and Sergeant Pepper's and stuff. And I like loved it so much. I made my dad make me like cardboard animals so I could have a band. You know,
Nice.
like and I was just surrounded by just music was everywhere. I just and so I ended up in high school. I started a band, and then I eventually ended up going to college for music too.
Awesome. So you would kind of encapsulate that to say you grew up around it and it just kind of stuck with you, and then at some point you decided that's what you wanted to do with your life.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I remember early on I wanted to be like a pilot, and then I realized I hate flying. So then I was over that. So
Sure.
and then like around that time, yeah, I was like, I think I really want to do this professionally. Like I was making money playing gigs when I was in high school. Like so I was like ready to like take the next step.
Okay, and that was going to be my next question because you mentioned that you were around music, but you didn't, specify that you started learning an instrument.
Hmm. Yeah, so my parents got my brother and I both got music lessons when we were young. He took drum lessons, I took piano lessons,
Hmm.
and I studied piano from the time I was 5, up to now. I mean, I still study with people and stuff, but like I started taking when I was 5, and I studied classical music all throughout high school and in college as well. Yep.
Okay, and then you said that you were playing gigs while you were in high school. Was that solo or were you in a band? How were you performing?
Mostly in a band. I started like we all have like our garage band. I started a garage band, and we played like parties and growing up in upstate New York in the 80s and 90s. They didn't really card you a lot, so
Hmm.
we played in bars when I was like 15. No one
Nice.
cared, you know. So so like yes, and they were they would pay us to play these restaurants and bars as a band primarily. Yeah.
Awesome. And then, so when you did go to college, did you go for a major in music theory or classical music or your instrument at large? What was you looking for at college or university?
Well, I wanted to I well I wanted to do I didn't want to just do straight performance or education, so I went for music technology actually,
Hmm.
recording. And I really just wanted to play, but that was the best way for me to get into a school was to like and be in a studio all the time, which is I love to do. So I studied audio engineering essentially.
Hmm.
Um, and then but the funny thing is, of all the kids in my class in college, I spent more time playing gigs than in the studio than like working on projects for school.
Sure.
You know.
So, would you say that going into the music technology aspect kind of played a significant role in determining to be like a session musician?
Yeah, I think so actually, because I did spend a lot of time in the studio, and I learned I learned my way around like Pro Tools and and I, this is in the or late '90s, so we still had a analog tape machine in my school, so I learned on 2-inch tape too, and I thought that was the coolest thing, and I wanted to just be around that stuff at all times. You know what I mean?
Sure,
I love
definitely.
creating in the studio.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you did get out of college, you kind of had that tone. You wanted to be a session musician, and then also you had your own projects going on. How did you kind of, take your first step into like that realm? Did you start booking like recording sessions with bands, like, or did you work exclusively with a studio? Give me a bit of explanation there.
So actually, out of college, I really didn't do a ton of session work until later. I wanted to, but I ended up just being a touring musician. Um, my first gig out of college, I worked at a theater in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, doing like a Broadway review
Hmm.
kind of thing, and I was in the house band for that, and that was a great gig because it paid really well, and it was not a lot of work. Once you learn the show, you kind of go on autopilot, and
Hmm.
but I just you couldn't be creative. There was no creativity. It was boring to me.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And so I after that uh, I joined a band from Baltimore called The Bridge, who were like a jam band on like the jam band scene, playing like all we played like Bonnaroo and all the big festivals in the early 2000s.
Hmm.
Um, and and that I did that for 6 years, and then from there I started doing session, like we recorded in the studio with, and then I started like getting into session work from there. And then after that I started my own band. When the Bridge broke up, I started my own band called Ham Bone Relay, which is like a funk organ trio.
Hmm.
And then I began on the side, so that band would tour, but then on the side I started like a remote recording business of my own, where I would do session work for people in my own studio. And then like, I could send them files via the internet, and
Hmm.
I played on tracks for people in Russia and stuff, you know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
So I kind of, to answer your question, I like toured a lot and then kind of melded into the session work from there.
Right, right. So along those lines, you mentioned that you do have your own studio or your own ability to record. These days, independent studios are relatively cheap, or home studios. So contributing to other people's projects all over the world, how did you kind of get your name out there to show that you were, interested in doing this and that you were available for those types of projects?
I started it started word of mouth. I had a nice studio in New Jersey outside of Philly before I got divorced, and then when I got divorced, it became like a more smaller like project studio, and I started doing selling my work on Fiverr, that website Fiverr,
Hmm.
um, where it started with like $5 for a gig. Now I can charge a few $100s for a gig, but it's the same thing. People find me on the Fiverr portal, and then from there I do a project. But then that led through, like word of mouth, and then my own private business grew so that I can get clients now without going through Fiverr. So it started on Fiverr, and then it grew from there.
Excellent. And then, so just to touch base again, in addition to that, you are also producing your own original music as well.
Yes, yeah, and I'm still, even though like I'm right now primarily a session player just because there are no gigs. I'm primarily, I mean, I want to be a touring musician. That's what I have done mostly for the
Hmm.
last 20 years, and I want to get back into that. But yeah, so my band, I write all the music for my band. I record it all. We actually just cut a record during the pandemic completely remotely, because the drummer's in Philly,
Hmm.
guitar player's in Jersey, and I'm in LA. So we just kind of, and then it all comes to me in my Pro Tools studio, and then I mixed it, and then we had someone else master it. But
Sure. Awesome. So, with those being your current projects, where would you like to see your career progress to in 5 or 10 years?
I think I have two goals really, and they're primarily in performing live. One goal is I'd like to grow my band to the point where we're touring. So right before the pandemic, we were playing about 100 shows a year. We were very busy, and I
Hmm.
want to get to that point again. And we were making money too. We weren't rich, but we were like paying our bills, and like we had a band fund, and we were able to like do 6 day, 7 day, 10 day runs and
Hmm.
afford that. So I want to get back to that point with my band. That's one goal.
Hmm.
And the other goal is I'd like to be a call for other musicians, other bigger musicians when they go on tour. I'd like to be like a first or second call to tour with somebody else. You know what I mean?
Sure,
If
definitely.
they need a keyboard player.
Awesome. So, what are what are some of your favorite and most prominent memories about participating in music, whether it be, going to a show or a recording session that went really well or bad, just something that was, really prominent that stands out to you.
Oh man. Well, I think that band, I learned a lot from those guys in the bridge from Baltimore because they were older than me. I was young when I joined that band. I was like kind of just coming up and learning about it. I learned a lot from them, and a lot of the memories I have are with them. I remember my first festival ever. I'd never played a hippie festival before, and I was on tour with them. It was all good music festival, and we're jamming, we're playing like a late night set, and all of a sudden, like the crowd just starts going crazy, and I'm like, what? I don't even do they even know who we are? This is like, and I look around, and Mike Gordon from Fish has walked on stage, and he starts playing with us,
Oh, cool.
and it was like what, you know, and that it was like crazy, and at music festivals a lot of times people sit in with everybody, and I guess our guitar player had talked to him backstage, and he was like, sure, I'll sit with you, and none of us knew it was going to happen. It just happened. Um, and so that was crazy and surreal. And then I kind of realized like, wow, this is awesome.
Mhm.
You mean you want to pay me to do this? All right, I'm in.
Right, for sure.
Um, and and I think also just another memory is being on the road with my band. Just like it's not like one specific memory. Just like in general, like being on the road. There's just something about like there's like this camaraderie. You learn about each other. My band's only a trio, and we would do like 6 7 hour drives and play an hour set.
Hmm.
And but it just was like you learn so much about each other, and like we would like stop at a gas station and play football in the parking lot, and like it just was like this brotherhood, and and
Hmm.
and you get so tight musically too that like you just know you can read each other. When like if we're jamming, I know when the drummer is going to turn the page and I'm going to follow him or he's going to follow me, and we just know we don't have to look at each other anymore.
Hmm.
And that's like such a great feeling that you can only get from playing a lot of shows and sitting in a van for 10 hours with two other dudes. you
Yeah.
know
Awesome. So, what are some links where people can check out your stuff and click on you and take a listen to what you're doing?
Sure. So my band is called Hambone Relay, and the band started on the East Coast. We're now on the West Coast. And I have two guys out here that are playing with us now, and it's a funk organ trio, and we're starting to get gigs out here in LA, and you can check us out on at hambonerelay.com. Um, we're also on Spotify and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the socials. Um, so, and then you can also, I have a personal website for my session work and stuff. It's just markbrownmusic.com.
Awesome. And so I always like to give the person I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word. So just a message that you feel you resonate that you want to put out there.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, just don't give up. Like if you believe in something, just keep doing it because, I, this pandemic really hit me hard. I went through this period of time where I wasn't playing any music. I was kind of depressed, as I'm sure a lot of us went through that. And I made a decision recently, actually, because it's been tough, moving, getting divorced, and everything. But I made a decision that I'm not going to give up, man. And you keep trying and you keep working at it. And if you work hard, man, good things will happen. You got to just keep plugging away,